we've been kind of on a Resident Evil kick. It's one of the things that I wanted to do for Horror Fest. But today I want to do an opinion video, and this opinion video is, where do I think the Resident Evil franchise should go from here? So, Resident Evil 7 obviously is a very big change for this franchise. It goes back to its survival horror roots, but it also puts the camera's perspective in first person for the first time ever in the franchise, not counting games like Dead Aim and the shitty gun game, I think it's called Survivor for PS1, which is one of the worst games ever made. It's not a shooter like that. So, that being said, where do I think Resident Evil's franchise should go from here? What would I like as a super fan of this franchise? Well, for starters, I'm not a huge fan of the first person thing. I get it. And honestly, because of how successful Resident Evil 7 was in terms of sales, I think that's where it's staying. I think that's where Resident Evil 8 is going to be in its mindset. And that, I'm fine with that. If I'm going to continue to get Resident Evil, so you have to think a lot of times when we get to the point of something like, for example, Resident Evil 6, which still sold incredibly well, but was critically panned almost everywhere. And I don't think it's a bad game, but a lot of people do. A lot of times you can get to that point, that's where a franchise dies. So it's impressive to see Resident Evil has made it to 7 entries in just the main series itself, not counting some of these offshoots like Revelations and stuff like that. So, personally for me, I'm okay with them keeping it in first person and doing the next Resident Evil, doing another original story, and doing new characters and stuff in this part of the franchise, if that's where they want to continue this. Honestly, Resident Evil as a numbered franchise kind of goes through trilogies of different types of games. Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3 were the tank controls and all that, and I guess you could throw in Code Veronica as well, but it's not a numbered Resident Evil. 4, 5, and 6 were the action-oriented Resident Evils. So I think 7, 8, and 9, if we actually get up to a 9, are going to be first-person survival horror games. And that's fine. I'm okay with it. However, if we're going to continue that way, then I think it is who of Capcom to continue the Resident Evil Revelations franchise, which is also excellent because it gives people and fans like me a chance to have a good time on new adventures with the returning characters that I love so much from Resident Evil. You think of characters like Jill Valentine, Chris Redfield, Barry Burton. Barry Burton is great, man. Claire Redfield. Barry Burton's daughter is in Revelations 2, grown up, Moria Burton. I thought that was a good throwback. I'd love to see a Resident Evil Revelations 3 starring Jill Valentine. Jill Valentine, I'm a starved man who loves Jill Valentine. I want to see Jill Valentine return to this franchise in some form. And if you're going to return her, please, for the love of God, make her face look like it did in all the other games. I don't know why they changed it in the original Revelations. It looks bad. Every time I play that game, I'm reminded of their dumb decision with that. So please, change it back to how she looked in all the other games. I would love to see a Revelations 3 that brings back characters that I love. Jill Valentine, obviously the one I'm pulling for, but I'll take anyone at this point, even Leon, which is probably my least favorite Resident Evil character because I think he's just overused. Think about it. He's in 2, 4, and 6, so I don't need him a part of the Revelation series. I've had a lot of games with Leon. Up until Revelations 2, didn't have a lot of games with Barry Burton, so it was cool that they brought him in. I would like to see a Resident Evil Revelations 3 kind of continue these offshoot stories because they're fascinating and enjoyable games, and they take the controls that are so good from Resident Evil 5 and 6. They kind of are like a combination of the two. You could run and shoot, but it plays more like Resident Evil 5, but you're auto running. Like it's a good balance that fits that series really, really well. So I'd like to see the Revelations franchise return. I really enjoy it. I've enjoyed, obviously, if you watch any of the live streams on this channel, I've been playing through Revelations 1 here, which I re-picked up on the Xbox One. I also still own a copy of it, for 360 as well. I did own it for 3DS at one time. I have it on PC. This is a game I've bought a lot, but this is a great game. And I'd like to see that franchise return. It's a good offshoot of the Resident Evil franchise, and I think it would be fun to experience those games again. Also, and this is going to be the second part of this, and this is going to get a little ranty, so bear with me. Where the hell is the Resident Evil 2 remake? It was announced in 2015. I've been waiting and waiting and waiting patiently for this game. Just show me a screenshot. Give me an idea of what it's going to look like. We have no idea what this remake's going to look like right now. Is it going to maintain the tank controls and be kind of a remake in the same vein as the Resident Evil remake that was put out on GameCube? Or is it going to be a complete overhaul of that game entirely and play more like 4, 5, and 6? Or are they going to really blow my mind and ruin it for me and put it in first person? We don't know right now. Like, I know nothing about that game. It was announced December of 2015, and here we are in September 2017 at the time of me recording this video, and I know nothing about that game other than, hey, we announced it and we're remaking it. Obviously, last E3 in 2016, I knew they weren't going to talk about it when they announced Resident Evil 7, and that was kind of like their thing. Hey, Resident Evil 7's the main focus. That game shipped in January. It's over. That game's out. It's done. Let's talk about Resident Evil 2 Remake. So I waited for E3 this year. I was like, okay, surely the PlayStation conference is going to have information about Resident Evil 2 Remake. Nothing. Not to mention their conference was bad to begin with, but nothing about Resident Evil 2 Remake. So now it's led me to believe that yes, they'll probably talk, they have to talk about it at PlayStation Experience in December, right? Like, they have to talk about this game. They have to acknowledge it still exists. It's one of those shit or get off the pop moments with a video game. Just come on. I've waited so long for this remake, and I just want to see, just give me a screenshot, give me a brief trailer, something to tell me that not only is this game real and still coming out, but it also shows me what the game's going to be like. What kind of control scheme am I looking at? What kind of camera am I looking at for this game? I'm very interested, very excited about that game. I'm still excited about this 2 years later. I'm excited about a video game that was announced almost 2 years ago that has had no information since it was announced. That's ridiculous, isn't it, when you think about it? But that's how much of a fan I am of this franchise. So I want to see information on that game. So that's kind of where I think Resident Evil should go right now. As far as the main series, you know, if they want to keep it in first person, they want to keep it spooky, scary, and do all this kind of stuff, that's fine. And do new characters and new storylines, I'm okay with that. But please, put more enemy types in the game. That was my main problem with Resident Evil 7 is you had the Bakers and you had the Molden, and that was it. So there's like 4 enemy types in the game, and that was it, and it was disappointing. And 3 of those are just family members that are bosses. So all the other shit that you fight in that game is literally just these molded characters, and it got kind of repetitive in that nature. I'm not saying Resident Evil 7 is a bad game or anything like that, but when you only have one major enemy type in your game, it gets to you after a while if you're playing a game for like 10 or 12 hours. So that was disappointing. I'd love to see more enemy types. I'd love to see returning enemy types. I mean, where were the hunters? You know, where were the giant snakes and the giant spiders and all this kind of mutated shit? None of that exists in Resident Evil 7. Did they all just die? Because it's weird, because I remember fighting them in Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6. So where did they go? If this is a continuation of 4, 5, and 6, because it's called 7 and they reference events that happened in 6, so it is a game that takes place after 6, what happened to all these enemy types? Did they just die out? Like, I don't think so. So I'd love to see those elements return as well. They did this whole supernatural element in Resident Evil 7. I thought it was okay, but at the end of the day, it was just some sort of strain of this virus. That's fine, it's okay, it's whatever. I would kind of like to see them stray away from the supernatural elements, because I don't feel that that services Resident Evil as a franchise very well. It was okay, I wasn't put off by it, but if I had my say in it, I'd kind of like to see them steer clear of any kind of supernatural elements. It just doesn't fit Resident Evil. Like, for me, leave supernatural out of Resident Evil. That's not what it's about. Resident Evil is about weird mutations and creepy crawlies around corners and that kind of shit. That's what I like about Resident Evil. It's about that weird, uneasy feeling the first time you're playing and you don't know what's around the corner. That's what I like about Resident Evil. And that was present, for sure, in Resident Evil 7. Don't get me wrong. That's present. That feeling you will get to you when you're playing Resident Evil 7 for the first time. However, when you get halfway through that game and you get that realization of, oh, I think the molded are the only enemy types in this game, and that's what it is, kind of wears thin on you for a little bit. To reiterate, I'd like to see the supernatural element kind of go by the wayside for Resident Evil 8, and I'd also kind of like to see more enemy types. Please, bring back some of the classic enemy types that I love from the Resident Evil 7 franchise back. That would be really cool. Finally, one other thing that I would like to see come back in some fashion, some form, however they want to do it, I don't know. I am a huge fan of the Resident Evil Mercenaries mode. Specifically the Mercenaries mode in Resident Evil 5, but I enjoyed it in Resident Evil 6. I enjoyed even the shitty offshoot 3DS game, which runs like garbage on that handheld, but I enjoyed it anyways. I actually, this past summer, I played a lot of that game on the 3DS, so I would like to see them do something with that. Make a big budget Mercenaries game. Now I know this is kind of a you know, very out there idea because I don't think it would sell very well particularly, but I would like to see a big budget Mercenaries release. You know, put that out. Bring all the characters I love. I would be happy if all we got was Resident Evil 8, which doesn't start any characters that we previously knew from Resident Evil, but I was able to get a Mercenaries game that had all of these great characters I know and love and can play them. Mercenaries mode, if you don't know what it is, it's a fantastic Resident Evil mode where you have a time limit and you can play it cooperatively up to 2 people. My best friend and I play this shit all the time. And still, to this day, Resident Evil 5 Mercs mode, we're modding it on PC, and it's crazy, and it's awesome. You have a time limit, and then you have to run around, you hit these other time things until you extend your time meter to a certain point, and then you have a limited number of enemies you have to defeat in the time limit. If you defeat all of them at a certain point, then you get a massive bonus, and you get a better score. It's really, really well done. It's an awesome mode. I loved it. It debuted in 4. Wasn't as big of a fan of 4 basically because the controls were kind of weird. And I think it was perfected in 5. They brought it to 6 and it's pretty decent. They changed some things about the formula in 6, but I liked it there too. And then they put out that 3DS game. But since then, the Revelations game has had something called Raid Mode. I think Raid Mode's pretty cool too. However, and that's the last thing, bullet point in this video that I want to talk about is I like the Resident Evil Revelations series a lot. I think it's a great series. I think if you're a fan of Resident Evil, you're going to have a good time with either of those games. However, if you're making a game, for the love of God, make the cooperative mode of that game online. Don't let it just be raid mode. I want to play through that story cooperatively online. Why is it split screen? Why can I split screen the campaign in Revelations 1 and Revelations 2, but I can't play it online with a friend who also owns a copy of the game? That makes no sense to me in 2017. Why is that a thing? You know, they did it in Revelations 1, they did it in Revelations 2. So, why is that a thing? Why? I just want to play that game I think it would be great in co-op online. Really, really would. So, that's my last complaint. I think if you make a Revelations 3, make it co-op online. Appease me, appease the fans of Resident Evil who like the co-op in those games. Do it, just do it. This is just a quick thing I wanted to add to this Resident Evil franchise video. As I was editing this video, the trailer was just released for the Chris I'm Not a Hero downloadable content pack for Resident Evil 7, which comes out December 12th of this year. This is a really weird thing to me, and the problem I have with it is you're taking the goodwill that they made with making Resident Evil 7, and you're kind of throwing it out the window by turning this into literally a first-person shooter. The footage that was released is literally you playing as Chris Redfield while he goes around shooting a bunch of different enemies. I have a problem with this because the whole point of Resident Evil 7 being set in first person was to make the game a survival horror experience in a virtual reality setting, and it also translated if you're not playing, you know, in virtual reality. The difference here is you're kind of throwing out the survival horror aspect, and now you're just going back to the run and gun action that was in 4, 5, and 6, only now it's in first person. At that point, then why make the game in first person? I don't know. I have an issue with it. It looks kind of generic. It looks weird. We'll see what it is. I will do a full review of that download content when it comes out on December 12th. But as of right now, seeing that, it's not the direction I want to see Resident Evil 7 or Resident Evil as a franchise go into. I'm not interested in making this a first-person shooter. I want the Resident Evil I like, which is survival horror. It's item management. It's all that stuff. And that doesn't look like it's present in the Chris I'm Not a Hero DLC. Now, yeah, again, you can say, hey, you're getting upset because it's a downloadable content. It's not, you know, the full game. I get that, but still, this seems like it's kind of a test to see how much fans can handle a first-person shooter in Resident Evil. Like, I don't want that. I want the survival horror aspect of the game fully intact, like it was in Resident Evil 7. I got past the idea of I don't really want a first-person Resident Evil 7 because it brought those elements to the table. And if we're throwing all those elements out the window, like it seems that they're doing with this download content, then what's the point? So those are just my 2 cents on that download content. But again, I will fully review it and we'll see where it is when it comes out December 12th, 2017. Anyways, guys, that's what I do with the Resident Evil franchise. That's what I want to see as a super fan of this franchise. What do you guys want to see? What do you want to see? Where do you want to see this series go in the next 5 years? Do you want to see a Revelations 3? Do you want to see a Resident Evil 8 that maintains the first-person mode, or did you not like that? Leave a comment in the comment section below. Let me know what you guys are thinking. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And as always, until next time.